Every year, players add more and more skills to their games. Many players who used to not be able to shoot early in their careers have developed decent jump shots. Many players who could not post up or bully people in the paint are now able to do that. But which players did a complete 180 with their playstyles? Which players changed their game so drastically that they look like a completely different player than before? In this video, we're going to take a look at those players. I don't want to include players who haven't been in the league for too long because a lot of young players improve naturally. And I won't include guys who are just plain old and can't do the same things as before. But anyway, here are 7 players who really transformed their playstyles. Number 7, Ricky Rubio. This might surprise you guys a bit, but Rubio plays a lot differently nowadays than back in Minnesota. When he was in Minnesota, he was primarily a pass-first point guard who loved to operate with the ball in his hands, dishing out sweet passes, finding his teammates at the right spots, played solid defense, and was a pretty poor jump shooter. He was kinda like Rondo or a younger Jason Kidd. But by the time he arrived in Utah, his role on the team changed a lot. While he's obviously still a point guard and still makes sweet passes, he doesn't run the offense as much as he used to, and instead he worked on his off-ball game and his mid-range game. Early in Rubio's career, he was shooting like 30 to 40% of his shots at the rim, which is a high number for a point guard, but now that number has reduced drastically, and he's taking more and more shots outside the paint. More of those shots are also assisted. In the 2018-19 season, nearly 40% of his 2-point shots were assisted, compared to less than 20% when he was younger. With Utah, he plays more like a combo guard. Both him and Donovan Mitchell share the floor a lot, and they take turns running the offense and take turns playing off the ball. As a result, Rubio's assist numbers have dropped off, as he went from averaging 8 or 9 assists per game in Minnesota to 5 or 6 in Utah. Coming to Utah, it was the first time in Rubio's career where he was sharing the ball handling duties, so he had to learn how to play off of him. It's great for his career though, and his mid-range and 3-point game has gotten much better. Number 6, Blake Griffin. Remember back in the day when Blake's primary role on offense was to just catch lobs and jump over people? He was always a good passer, but he didn't really have the chance to show it that much playing next to CP3. Now moving on to Detroit, Blake has transformed his entire game and his entire attitude. Not only did he become one of the best all-around players we've ever seen, but he also emerged as a true leader of the team. Back in the day, his leadership was called into question. He had some confrontations with people in the organization, like when he threw a punch at his equipment manager, and some other things too. In fact, his ex-fiancée actually filed a lawsuit against Blake, and the lawsuit revealed some questionable habits. Apparently, him and CP3 had a tense relationship. He frequently had disputes and communication issues with his teammates, and apparently he was seen as a hard-partying man-child. I guess moving to Detroit humbled him. On the court in the 2018-19 season, he shot 7 threes a game. Back in his early days in LA, he didn't even shoot 1 3 a game. That's pretty crazy. He also averaged a career high in scoring, and now he's fully maximizing his passing ability. Number 5, Eric Gordon. Back in the day with the LA Clippers, Gordon used to be a completely different player. He actually used to be like a mini James Harden. He would relentlessly attack the rim, draw a ton of fouls, a great passer off the dribble, and his step-back jumper was a crucial part of his game. However, over the years, with a combination of injuries and joining the Rockets, Gordon has primarily become a spot-up shooter. Yeah, he does drive to the rim occasionally, but nowhere near as much as before. He also used to take a lot of mid-range jumpers, but obviously the Rockets don't want him taking those. Nowadays, he takes a ton of threes. In fact, from 2016 to 2018, he attempted 8.8 threes a game, always near the top of the league in 3-point attempts. Roughly 64% of his total field goal attempts come from there, which is ridiculous considering he barely took 1/3 of his shots from 3 early in his career. And the thing is, his overall number of field goal attempts hasn't changed much, so he's still shooting the same volume of shots. It's just most of them are threes now. We still see flashes of his former self, the old Eric Gordon with the explosive first step and great ability to finish, but it's pretty rare. Number 4, Chris Paul. You probably didn't expect Chris Paul to be on this list, because, I mean, how much did his game really change? Well, it changed a lot. Believe it or not, Paul wasn't always this calculated, steady-minded point guard that you saw in Los Angeles or Houston. Back in the day, he was an athletic freak. Despite being only 6 feet tall, his playstyle was closer to a guy like Russell Westbrook, but a much better shooter. He had arguably the quickest first step in the entire league and one of the best mid-range games we've ever seen. Nowadays, his mid-range game is still good, but back then, he shot them at a much higher volume. From 2007 to 2010, 40% of Paul's shots came from mid-range, and he hit them at a 46% clip. That's a crazy high volume, and he was arguably the best mid-range shooter in the entire league. Part of the change in his game has to do with, well, obviously just like Eric Gordon, joining the Rockets has lowered his mid-range shot attempts. But that's not the main reason for his declining athleticism. Back in 2010, Paul suffered a major knee injury at the age of 24, and he had to get arthroscopic surgery. After that, his athletic ability took a major hit. You could go back and watch his old highlights comparing him from 2009 to 2011. It's a major difference, and he looks nothing like he used to. But with that being said, Paul adjusted and adapted his game quite nicely, and still maintained his status as a premier point guard for a long time. Number 3. Giannis Antetokounmpo. Keep in mind, the order of this list is not based on how talented each player is, or else Giannis would be higher. It's mainly about which players transformed the most, in my opinion. While Giannis did make a drastic transformation, especially with his dominance in the paint, his playstyle was not super different than when he was younger. When he was a rookie and sophomore, he still handled the ball pretty often, and he still tried to take slower guys off the dribble. He was still a big mismatch for other wing players and smaller guards. However, the biggest transformation with Giannis is his post-game and physicality. Much of his improvement has to do with his ridiculous body transformation. In just 5 years, he went from this to this. In the regular season, he averaged over 17 points a game in the paint, the highest since Shaquille O'Neal in 2003. His overall shot selection changed quite a bit, as he's now taking 57% of his shots between 0 and 3 feet. This change mainly has to do with the Bucks' coaching change. When Mike Budenholzer took over, he emphasized that the entire team has to take more shots at the rim, and that benefits Giannis's game. His ability to bully people in the paint, even with multiple defenders around him, that was something he definitely could not do when he first came into the league. Giannis went from a raw prospect with very limited basketball experience to arguably the most dominant player in the NBA today, in just 5 short years. Number 2. Marvin Williams. There was a time when Marvin Williams used to play like Kevin Durant, or at least he tried to play like Kevin Durant before Durant was even in the NBA. He was supposed to be Kevin Durant before Kevin Durant. A long, athletic, 6'10" small forward who can handle the ball, do crossovers, and played like an oversized shooting guard. That's a good description of Marvin's game early on, but he obviously was not very effective. After moving on from the Atlanta Hawks, Marvin realized that, it's too late for me to develop into a superstar and live up to the hype that everyone expected of me. So slowly, Marvin reinvented himself. He packed on some extra muscle and moved from small forward to power forward, and then tirelessly worked on his three-point shots. By the time he arrived in Utah and then Charlotte, he became one of the best stretch fours in the entire league, and also became a much improved defender, 2 things that were weaknesses when he was younger. For a guy who was the number 2 pick, drafted ahead of Chris Paul and Deron Williams, Marvin never lived up to his expectations, and was considered as a bust for most of his career. And while he's still considered as a bust, at least he's still in the league and he's still contributing. Many thought his career would be over after leaving Atlanta, but after reinventing himself, he's still playing in the NBA well into his 30s. And number 1, Brook Lopez. There's really not much to say here. We all know how ridiculous the change in Brook's game was. He used to be a straight-up post-up player, and that's all he did. He played in the paint, he drew a lot of fouls, he never made a single 3 in his first 6 seasons in the NBA. Approximately 70% of his shots came between 0 and 10 feet, very close to the basket. But in the 2018-19 season with the Bucks, only 27% of his shots came from there. Now, the bulk of his shots are three-pointers. He attempted over 6 threes a game and also made the most threes out of any player who's at least 7 feet tall in NBA history. I think Lopez might have had the biggest transformation we've ever seen. It's crazy when you think about it. We've never ever seen a traditional post-up center completely transform into a stretch 5. I guess that's what the Milwaukee Bucks needed him to do. It worked out well for the team. Anyway, that's all folks. Those were 7 NBA players who greatly transformed their playstyles. This video is sponsored by Ridge Wallets. The Ridge Wallet is a minimal, front pocket wallet that's designed to let you ditch your bulky wallet. This wallet is slim, RFID blocking, and lifetime guaranteed. It comes in titanium, carbon fiber, aluminum, polycarbonate, and with over a dozen different styles and colors. Get 10% off today with free worldwide shipping by going to ridgewallet.com/Andy. Let me know if you guys have any more players who should have been on this list. Let me know in the comments who else transformed their games. Thank you everyone so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.